I think I have hundreds of great memories.
For the last 2 decades, photojournalist David Honl has been traveling the world, always coming back with some of the most captivating images. Photos that have appeared in Newsweek, Time, People magazine, and so many others. This week, Honl is preparing for yet another trip.
This week I'm heading to the Turkish-Syrian border to spend some time with Syrian refugees that have crossed the border because of the civil war that's going on in Syria right now.
Why is it important for you to go and capture these images?
I think the satisfaction I get out of showing my pictures to people, particularly back here in the United States, who really don't get to see what happens in the rest of the world. They're sort of force-fed it through the news, and it's really not what the real picture is.
When he looks back at his photos, and he has thousands, David vividly remembers the story behind each one.
Sort of during the height of the Iraq War, I had some downtime in the Green Zone in Baghdad, and I was able to spend about a week with families that were displaced from the war. And when the war broke out, they lost everything, and they had to take shelter in whatever buildings they could. And several families took shelter in an old abandoned theater that Saddam Hussein had built to have actors and musicians entertain him. At this point of the war, it was left empty. Everything was looted. There was really only rooms with a roof overhead. So I spent a lot of time with these Iraqi families, and I got a really great set of pictures documenting that experience, and it was a really great personal experience for me. Another more recent experience that always makes me smile is a trip to Afghanistan last year. And driving through the mountains, we stopped alongside the road to this hotel. Everything had been bombed out of it. No windows, no doors left. And there was an older Afghan man greeting us, smiling, offering us tea and cookies. And it turned out that this man worked at the hotel before the Taliban had destroyed it. And he spent every day there growing flowers and offering tea to passersby. It's really not a place you can stay as a hotel anymore. And after having tea and cookies with him for about an hour and hearing about his life, I got a really great set of portraits of him with the bombed out remnants sort of surrounding him.
But not all of his trips have been nice and peaceful. David was once covering a protest near Istanbul when suddenly he was attacked. His beating ended up all over the newspapers.
I was living in Istanbul at the time, and I was covering the May Day protests, and there was a huge crowd of people there, a lot of protesting the imprisonment of a PKK leader. And I was photographing a couple of Kurdish guys pounding their fists in the air and hailing the PKK leader. And they started to get violent towards me. They started screaming at me, and I was trying to communicate with them in Turkish and sort of broken Kurdish that I was okay. And then I was hit on the back of the head, and then once I got down on the ground, I was beaten by 3 or 4 of them. And I ran, obviously, and I thought it would sort of go away after that. Well, the next morning it was in all the local newspapers throughout Istanbul and Turkey, and it was on CNN, and I was shaking for a few days after that.
Still, there is something about the Middle East that has captured his heart. David keeps going back year after year.
I find that people are the same all over the Middle East. They want peace, they want happiness, just like everybody else does. And many times, even through a war, they go on with their daily lives just as anybody would. They may have lost their homes, they may have lost family members, but they really have, I think, the most positive outlook anybody could have in that situation. So I assume that the people that I'll meet this week will have much of the same things going on in their lives.
While David has used different cameras to capture his images, when he travels to a war zone, he always travels light. Take a look. One bag with 2 small cameras.
So I don't carry much for camera gear. I really love these Nikon V1s. They're mirrorless cameras. The technology is probably 10 times better than the SLRs that I used to use at the beginning of the Iraq War. So I can get, on a 64 gigabyte Lexar card, I can get about 2,000 RAW files on each one of these cameras. I know they're tiny, but I'd much rather impress people with my pictures than carrying big fancy cameras around with me.
No doubt, David will come back with more great photos to share with the world.